Hi there, I've decided to show you some GIS resources that I use in lessons, and I've also collated them from a number of places. So my thinking behind doing this is because there's a tension between you using GIS at the front on the board and saying, you know, we're doing some GIS, which is the very low-hanging fruit, I think, is a quick win just to say we're doing GIS when you've got it at the front as a teacher, versus booking a PC room and the students getting their hands dirty, uploading data and doing a lot more of the skills themselves. And you know, there's a fine balance between the two. You want the students to learn the GIS skills, but you also want them to be doing some geographical thinking. And I think there's a trade-off between those two sometimes. And it's finding that sweet spot in the middle, isn't it? So hopefully some of these resources will inspire you to use them with your students. I've noticed recently a lot of ArcGIS links are now retired. I don't know if the user has removed them or they've been timed out or the subscription's gone or whatever, but they seem to just to be disappearing now. And also a lot of the data is now, you know, 25 years old. I'm seeing census data being used from 2001. So I've updated a lot of stuff with some modern day links. So the links I'm going to use are here. I've made some tiny URLs. Which I'll put in the message underneath this video. There are 14 of them. Note these two here. There's a 14 and a 15. There is no 13. I'm not superstitious. I just couldn't get the tinyurl.com. They relate to a variety of topics, and I've collated these from a number of places, from the GA website, the Geographical Association, the Royal Geographical Society, Oak National Academy, Teach with GIS, and my own knowledge and what I use in lessons. But I'm finding a lot of these links or these resources at the bottom, the links are now becoming retired and dead. So I thought I'd get them together and show you what I'm up to. So let's start at the top and work our way down and have a look at 14 exciting GIS resources that you can use. So the first one is called Null Earth, earth.nullschool.net. And it's a 3D globe, as you can see, and it puts layers of data on top of it. Now, the magic is down in the bottom left. So if you click the bottom left where it says Earth, you can then, at the moment, I've got temperature selected. So these are temperatures around the globe at the moment. And I can click on the UK. I can zoom in and click roughly where I am. And then just on the left, you can see it's supposedly 16.8 degrees outside. You can see the airflow, which is quite cool. I can go up to the Arctic and click on the North Pole, and you can see it's minus 31. I can look at relative humidity, dew point, wind speeds and wind directions, particulates. I can look at the oceans, which is quite cool, I guess, looking for sort of El Nino and what have you. So that's called earth.nullschool.net. And I think that's really cool. Even if it's just the starter on the board at the beginning of your lesson, I really think it captures the imagination, and it could be a really good inquiry starting point. The second website is Teach with GIS, and this is link number 2. And in particular, I liked the La Palma eruption GIS task. There's a PowerPoint that comes with it. I'm just going to click through. You can click on the link there that goes to a map. And then it's got some questions about locating the Canary Islands, and then eventually doing some really good geographical thinking, looking at the GIS data. So, for example, this is the link that you open. There's a number of tabs at the bottom that relate to the questions. The red dots, I think, are settlements or buildings. You've got then the lava flows and different land use, and you have to make decisions working through the PowerPoint. It's really, really good. I'm very impressed with this one. I've not seen this before, but that's off the shelf, ready to go. You know, there are questions here that you could tweak yourself. Okay, the next one is to do with this is a geography visualizer. I think this is really good. You know, you can zoom in and out just like you would on Google Earth, I guess, or Google Maps. But the power for this is that it's got layers already loaded in. So if I click Add Layer at the bottom, I get this menu that then pops up, so I can put on UK rainfall, UK temperatures. But again, as you can see here, 2020, you know, we're already sort of 6 years out of date at time of filming. We've got a geology map, cities of the world, multiple deprivation, again, only up to 2019, global maximum temperatures, rainfall up to 2010, land cover. Let's go for geology. So I just click the add, and then I cross the menu, and then give it a few seconds, and that should add some geology onto the map I've already got, the satellite image, and there it is. So that's the UK. I can zoom out a tiny bit. I can click legend, and I've got a legend on there. And then I can actually change the transparency on this. I think if I go into map layers, and then I can change the transparency here. So I could, you know, I could find that sort of biting point. I can change the base map if I wanted. Let's go for this one, and then I can get some town names, I guess, and I can zoom in and see different places. There we go. So I'm in Reading at the moment, so I can get, you know, a fairly decent geology map of Reading and surroundings. So lots of layers here. I can add multiple layers at the same time if they make any sense at all. But the students can play around with them. So there's no uploading as such. It's a very quick add layer. You can measure as well. You can draw lines on here. You can go into 3D view, which is really cool. You can measure distances. So for example, you could measure how far a coast has eroded, etc., etc. But that's quite a nice one. I did like that. Okay, the next one is a website that looks at climate change in the future and projections. So we have 3 different maps. On the left, there's sort of a current map, only up to 2010 again. But then the middle map is for the next 30, 40 years or so. And then the right-hand map is all the way up to 2099. At the top, I can pick precipitation or temperature. I can change the season, and I can change the climate model, which is quite interesting. So we've got a low mitigation and a significant mitigation scenario. I can choose one or the other. But then what I can do is I can just look at these statistics at the bottom, and you can see that average rainfall is expected to decrease for the whole map area. And it's got some sort of hard figures on there and percentage change as well, which is quite cool. But what you can do is just I'm going to pick the middle map. I can just zoom in on the middle map, and you can see the other 2 maps just follow suit. I can zoom in on the area I'm in, say, you know, the Reading and Wokingham area. The other 2 maps will copy, and you can see the statistics change accordingly. So in my area, between now and 2070 to 2099, we'll see a 27.9% decrease in rainfall. I can then flick to temperature and do something very, very similar. So there are no questions that go with this. You know, you might need to think about writing, a lesson to go with this, but this is really, really good use of data and layers of data to make decisions. Here we go. Here's temperature, and clearly you can see the temperature increasing as we go further into the future. I can go to winter and get a different look on things, and I can change the climate model that we're using. I guess these are sort of Met Office models that we're using. Similarly, the next website is 50 years of UK weather. And what you can do, what I like about this one is it actually gives you a monthly breakdown, whereas before it was sort of an area. Again, you can zoom in on the map on the right, and the figures, the monthly rainfall changes. It's on map window at the moment, and very quickly I can compare that to the UK average, and it flicks between the 2. Along the bottom, we've got a sort of a bar chart. I can sort of zoom in on the data. Again, this only goes up to 2020. So a few years out, but the students could practice describing change there. And then on the left, we've got sort of this gauge. And for the map window I've got open, the average rainfall is 789 millimeters. Compare that to the rest of the UK, it's a little bit under. I can then click on temperature and get a very similar sort of dashboard. And I can also click on snow days and see how what the snow days are like at the moment. I can play around with months. That's quite a cool line graph on the bottom, look, showing mean average temperature. So this is not a projecting forward one. This is not a sort of climate forward-looking model. It's just looking at historic data, I guess, from the Met Office. Okay, let's move on to volcanoes and earthquakes. Now, there are a couple of websites that are brilliant, but they have unfortunately been discontinued. I know that there's a number of these, but this is just one I like. It's called volcanoesandearthquakes.com. So you've got an interactive map on the right. Importantly, there's a label or a tab up here that says plates. I can put the plate margins on. Okay, obviously that's really important for the students to look at the connection between volcanoes and earthquakes. So I've got a database on the left of all the earthquakes that have happened recently. I can, right in the top left, I can hide volcanoes and the volcanoes click off. I can hide quakes. I can put quakes back on. I can filter them by magnitude. So I can go for magnitude 7s plus. I can look back over time. So I can look back over the last 2 weeks. Let's put them all on because there aren't many that have happened in the last day or so. I can go into an archive. I can then change the year. I can change the month. And I can zoom in on a certain area as well, which I think is a really cool website. If you actually zoom in, you can actually click on volcanoes and it gives you a tiny bit of data there. It's a link to a webcam if applicable, etc., etc. Let's put some quakes on. There we go. So these are recent quakes. I can click on a quake. This was 5 hours ago, and there's a stream of data there with links to go beyond. I think the plate map is really important, of course, so you can see the connection and the correlation between the two. Okay, let's move on to the next link. So this is to do with Sustainable Development Goals. I think a lot of the data that I've seen before is now out of date. It talks about the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, whereas this is the SDGs. So this data is up to 2025. The first page you arrive on is an overall index. So 100% means they've completed every single SDG that's been set. But one by one, for starters, you can click on the country and it's got the ranking. It's got each individual SDG and how they're doing, traffic lighted. You can download data for the US or wherever you want to go in the planet. But then you can actually click on the individual SDGs. So number 1 is poverty, no poverty. 2 is zero hunger. 3, 4, etc., etc. And the students can spot patterns between them and start thinking about how they can address these SDGs, looking at anomalies. That's quite interesting. Belarus has achieved this SDG, SDG 6, which is clean water and sanitation. Okay, next website is to do with river gauges in England, Wales, and Scotland, and Northern Ireland. In fact, there's a sort of a filter at the bottom, so I can filter latitude and longitude, or I can zoom in on my area. I'm randomly going to pick a river gauge. This is River Kennet, and then I can draw a plot, and it gives me a little plotting tool on the right-hand side over time, which is quite cool. I can change between flow and runoff, etc., etc. Do like that one. Really, really cool. Okay, the next website is to do with climate change. This is a brilliant website that I use with, I think it's year 8s or year 9s actually. And this is really reliable data. It's sourced. Every graph that it uses, it has sources on it, and it has a whole host of stuff. Temperature anomalies, sea surface temperatures, really up to date as well. You know, this doesn't stop in 2010. Antarctic sea ice, carbon dioxide concentrations, the amount of ice sheets in the northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, average ocean heat content in the top 700 meters, a map of spatial temperature anomalies, nitrous oxide, etc., etc., loads of greenhouse gases. And what I've done with my group is I've got them to challenge some claims. So, for example, I might make up a claim myself that the world is getting hotter, and then I would direct them to some of the graphs, depending on how able they were, and they would have to use the graphs and the data to look at the claim and say whether the claim is true or false and to what extent. And they really, really enjoyed doing that. if you want to challenge them a little bit, you can actually combine two bits of data together. You know, to what extent does this graph support this graph, for example? But there's a lot they can play around on. But there's probably, you know, 30 to 40 graphs on here, all sorts of stuff. Okay, the next link is the Census 2021, the UK Census 2021. Please don't use 2001 stuff. It's really, really out of date. But this is from the ONS, the Office for National Statistics. And on the left, you can actually go back, look to, that's the change since 2011. On the left here, there are some menus that you can direct the students to, and you can then click them and you get further choice. So let's look at age on Census Day, and I can produce a choropleth map of the data they've collected. Now, importantly, the key at the bottom probably needs some explaining to the students. It does actually show quartiles here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 chunks. So these are quartiles. So the median value is 18.4 for the map that I've got on the screen. I can then zoom around different areas. I guess these are different wards. And then it gives me an arrow showing what I'm hovering over on the legend. So for example, if I go to Oxford, it shows me it's 15.6, and that shows me where that would be in those quartiles. If I go to other graphs or other maps, for example, this is born in the UK, you can see there are 5 colours here, so they would be quintiles. So it's slightly different depending on which map you pick. And you really can zoom in. You know, you can go down to quite a deep level. You know, I can look at Oxford there, and the students can look up where they live, for example. Obviously, be very sensitive about this. You know, and talk to them about being respectful of, you know, where people live, I guess. But that's a really, really cool website. There's absolutely tons on this you can use. Okay, the next website is to do with change, I guess. This is brilliant. It's a world map. I can zoom out, I can zoom in. Let's go over the Amazon, and then there's a toggle on the right, on the left, where I can do sort of a split screen before and after. So on the left, I've got a map from 2022. On the right, I've got a map from 2014, and I have this window pane that I can do a sort of before and after type thing. So, you know, you could test out claims. So for example, if I zoom in on this area of deforestation, you know, to what extent is deforestation still happening in this area? Is it actually reforesting? So that's 2022. That's 2020. So you can see here that deforestation has happened. But there are some areas, I don't think I'll be able to find one now, where actually reforestation has happened, and actually, you know, it is recovering, which is really, really interesting indeed. But it doesn't have to be deforestation at all. You can go anywhere around the country, anywhere around the world, and do this sort of before and after split screen effect. Okay, let's move on to another website. This one is from the Met Office. If I can click on it. Okay, so this website shows temperatures that have been uploaded by amateur weather hobbyists. There's a drop-down box. You can change temperature to any variable you can see there, wind speed, humidity, etc. There's also a calendar that at the top there's a drop-down thing for calendar, so you can go back in time and select different dates and whatnot. And it's just been updated pretty much hourly. Okay, yeah, there's the calendar there. You can see on the top. You can search for different locations. You can zoom in and zoom out. The students can look for temperature patterns. You know, they can describe, but also they can drill down on a certain weather station. There's a random one, and get a full detailed weather history for that particular station. So it's pretty cool if you've got a weather station near your school or even at your school. So as I say, zooming out, you can sort of see, you know, Northwest Europe, across into the States as well.
Pretty cool website. The next website is called Is the UK Hot Right Now? I think this is super cool. And the idea is it takes live data, just like before, from weather stations, and it compares the temperatures to the average taken between 1991 and 2020, I believe it is. So it looks at the differences between the current and historic temperature that it's been recording. So you can see at the moment the average temperature difference is 6.9 across the UK compared to its historic average. So yes, it is hot. It's got a calendar, so you can change the date, you can change the hour, because this is an hourly thing. You can even zoom in and pick a station. Let's pick a station near me. That's RAF Benson, and you can get some really spectacular data from it. The red square in the top right, that's now, and it shows you the anomaly compared to historic data from this day, this exact time, for whatever it's got on record. It's pretty cool because it shows the red line is the 95th percentile, and the blue line is the 5th percentile. So you can really go into some statistics if you want with the students, looking at the data. This is just a distribution of the historic years, where we are now at this time, this exact time, compared to history. And you can even go hour by hour, so you can see that actually, you know, we popped above the average or the 95th percentile earlier this morning. It's even got a day-by-day calendar look, color-coded for ease, and you can change the dates and times on there as well. Importantly, Ed Hawkins is involved, from the University of Reading, and he is Mr. Climate Stripes, so he's behind this. Final website you might have seen is called thetruesizeof.com. I wrestled with myself as to whether this was GIS. I guess it is because it's layers of data, but it's not, maybe not for the purists, GIS. Let's put a country in, Greenland, which is in the news recently. Greenland looks massive on this projection, the Mercator projection, but when you drag it down to the equator, you can then compare it to other countries at a similar latitude. So you can see actually it's quite a small place, or not as big as it looked when it was at the top of the globe. Russia's quite cool. Russia, obviously, you know, a commonly studied country at Key Stage 3, but actually when you drag it to the equator, it's, you know, roughly double the size of Brazil, perhaps not as big as the students thought it was, based on the projection they've seen. So obviously a globe is better than a flat map, and this sort of reinforces that point. So those are all of the websites.